Welcome to part 7 of our module 7, which is motivation, emotion, and personality. Today what we're going to be talking about is stress and health. So the first thing we need to do here is to talk a little bit about what stress is and what it looks like. Now this is just kind of an introduction piece just to get us thinking about it a little bit. So one thing we've actually seen with relatively recent studies, and this is from 2013, so it's a little old and it's closer to kind of when I would have been a teenager, just I think I was like 21 at the time. But so it's a little bit younger than you guys, but we did see in 2013 with the APA's Stress in America survey, we actually found that the most stressed out age group in the United States was teenagers at the time. And this is probably relatively similar to today. So we do kind of see that as life goes on, generally speaking, people actually become less stressed. And this is something that we can talk about a little bit later, but it is an interesting piece to kind of start off with. Now, the first thing we have to do is kind of talk about and explain what stress is. So the technical definition, right? Stress is the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events called stressors that we appraise as threatening or challenging. Now, what's important to understand is stress is a reaction. That's the main kind of piece. So there are certain events, stressors, and stress is the reaction to that event. Now, when we experience stress, it's going to be because we believe that whatever this stressor is threatening or challenging, okay? And we're responding to that with this stress response. Now, the main piece that we're going to be looking at and talking about today is what is called and I'm trying to figure out how to get out of the way here. I'm just going to cover it up a little bit, sorry. Is what is called the general adaptation syndrome, which is stress response. General adaptation syndrome will sometimes be broken down into just GAS, G-A-S. So what it is this concept that the body's response to stress will go through 3 phases. Those 3 phases are the alarm phase, the resistance phase, and the exhaustion phase. Okay, so again, 3 stages: alarm, resistance, exhaustion. Now, stress is basically a defense mechanism. What it's there to do is to help us deal with whatever this situation is that feels threatening. So we have a stressor that comes up. We have this stress response, which is there to, again, be a defense mechanism to defend us from whatever this stressful situation is. Now, one thing we do see, though, is that if stress is prolonged or really severe, it's incredibly stressful, it can result in negative health consequences. We'll talk about this a little bit more towards the end, but it can result in diseases of adaptation or even death. So we can actually have problems caused by extended or very severe stress responses. So let's talk about general adaptation syndrome a little more. And this is what the main focus of this section will be on any AP Psych test. They generally will focus on the general adaptation syndrome. So our first phase is alarm. Okay, that is phase 1, alarm. So when we're talking about alarm, what it is our first reaction to the stressor. What's going to happen is our sympathetic nervous system is going to become activated, and we're going to start to experience all of the physical and physiological reactions that are preparing our body. Again, we're preparing our body to defend ourselves. So that sympathetic nervous system kicks in, our adrenal glands start releasing a whole bunch of different hormones, and those are going to then cause the physiological responses. Some of the big ones are increasing the heart rate, increasing blood pressure, increasing the supply of blood sugar, and what we're going to get is this burst of energy. Okay, this is why when you become stressed, a lot of times you kind of become like jittery. That's that energy. This energy, we're basically kicking up we're having this really extreme physiological response. We're having an arousal, and what that's doing is it's preparing our body to deal with whatever the stressor is. So again, the first phase is alarm. You can see it right here, and we are basically beginning this resistance phase. We're beginning preparing our body. The second phase is resistance. So alarm, then resistance. Resistance is our body basically keeping that high level of arousal to then deal with what's going on. So our body settles into a sympathetic division activity, continue to release these stress hormones that help the body fight off or resist the stressor. So again, our body is preparing us to deal with whatever the stressor is. Now, one thing that's kind of important to think about is, again, human beings evolved outside of kind of the society that we live in today. So if you think about what stressors would have been in the past, a lot of times stressors would be things that are physically dangerous to us. An animal or a predator comes up, another person that's aggressive comes up to us. And so a lot of these reactions seem very much set to allow us to deal with physical harm, right? To fight off or flee from an animal or something like that. So if you think about that, all of these different reactions make sense. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to resist and fight whatever this thing is that we feel like is a danger. Okay. In addition to kind of all these other hormones, one of the big ones that we'll see is neuroadrenaline. Neuroadrenaline has to do with pain processing. We talked about that earlier when we talked about neurotransmitters. So one of the things that we see is actually when people are really stressed or under stress, they actually experience less pain or an insensitivity to pain. Again, this would be really useful if the stressor is something that is going to physically harm me. Now, our final phase is what is called exhaustion. So this is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, if we get to the exhaustion phase, what happens is our body runs out of resources. So we experience exhaustion. And basically, again, we're just running out of our what we use to have energy, right? We're running out of glucose. We're running out of these different, material needs that we have to burn. That way we can keep our body functioning at a really high level. So when we reach exhaustion, we basically run out of that. Now, going through exhaustion is a very negative thing. Now, one thing that's important with this general adaptation syndrome is exhaustion does not always have to occur. Ideally, you will not experience the exhaustion phase of the general adaptation syndrome. Now, it can. It's not like it happens one time and that's it, but ideally you won't. So when we experience it, though, it can lead to stress-related diseases, or even in extreme cases, we can even cause us to collapse, or it even causes death sometimes in very extreme cases. Again, what's happening is our body literally just runs out of energy. If you've ever had a really, really stressful day, and that day when that was a long period of time where you were stressed for an extended period of time, at the end you might just literally just feel exhausted, like you're just completely out of energy. That's this exhaustion phase. You basically just burn through so much that your body has just run out of things to burn, and you don't have any more energy to do anything. Now, once that stressor ends, right? Our parasympathetic nervous system basically kicks in, and it'll have basically get our body trying to replenish all the things that we lost. And this is just like with anything else. When you go and you work out really hard afterwards, you oftentimes will feel very hungry because you need to replenish all the resources that you burned. Same idea here with stress. We've burned all sorts of things, so our body is going to bring us down, and then we need to replenish those resources. We're going to be really thirsty, we're going to be hungry, we might need to sleep. All these different things are there to replenish our body, basically. Now, like I said, the exhaustion phase doesn't always necessarily have to happen. If we are able to deal with stress very actively and deal with it well, we might be able to, we will still go through this phase of going downwards, but we won't necessarily experience kind of these more extreme side effects of exhaustion, I guess. You may still be tired, but it's not going to quite be as extensive or serious. So let's talk about some of those ways that we can cope with stress. So how do we do this other than just, becoming exhausted at the end? One of the big ones is what is called tend and befriend, the tend and befriend response. So what this is basically the idea that under stress, people often provide support to other people, and they bond with and seek the support of others, which is the tend and befriend part. So people will provide provide support. That's the tend part. So when you see someone who seems really, really stressed and you go out of your way to do something for them, that's tending. You're tending to that person, you're supporting them. And then in addition, you also create bonds. You might seek to bond with other people. Somebody you don't know, it's actually not uncommon for people to bond in a stressful situation, even if they don't know each other, or to seek support from others. All of that is considered the befriend. Now, this tend and befriend response is actually much more common in women than it is in men. So it's more likely that we'll see women using this kind of tend and friend response to help each other deal with stress. On the other hand, because of this, men are much more likely than women are to withdraw or turn to something like a substance to deal with stress. So when men become stressed, I don't want to say like all men are going to do this, but more likely, more often than with women, men will withdraw into themselves, will separate themselves away from other people, or will turn to things like substances. We talked before about stress, and I'm trying to remember what unit it is, and I think it was in development. We talked about how men are much more likely to become alcoholics. Men are much more likely to commit suicide than women. And this may be part of that, right? Because when we experience stress, we're more likely to deal with it in different ways. One of them is obviously this tend and befriend is much more healthy than to withdraw or to turn to alcohol to deal with that stress or other sorts of drugs. So let's talk about what stressors are. What are stressors? So the definition of stressors is kind of weird because it's a stress-causing event. So basically, anything that causes stress is a stressor. Okay? So it's a stress-causing event that come from within a person or from an external source and range from relatively mild to severe. So again, pretty much anything can be a stressor. It just depends on the person. These can be things that are internal, that are your own thoughts or feelings or beliefs. They can be things that are external, like you get in a car accident. And again, there's a wide range. Sometimes things are stressful, but just a little stressful. Sometimes things are incredibly stressful. They're very severe, right? Life or death instances are things that are high stress. So there's really this giant range. Now, we do break those up into three main categories. We have catastrophes, we have significant life changes, and we have daily hassles. Those are the three basic types. I'm trying to remember. No, I want to stay here for a second. So an example of a catastrophe would be something like a car accident, a natural disaster, right? Those are things that are considered catastrophes. They're big, large-scale events that cause stress. Significant life changes are exactly what they sound like. They're a big change in life. So if your parents get a divorce, that would be considered significant life changes. Or you move, or you get a new job, or if you get a divorce, or you get married even, is a stressor for some people. So all of those things would be considered significant life changes. And then daily hassles are exactly what they sound like. They're things in your daily life. So maybe you're driving to work or driving to school and there's a lot of traffic and you're going to be late. That's a stressor. It's a daily life stressor. Maybe you have a bunch of stuff to do and you can't catch up with it, or you're running to one place to get there on time, or whatever. Those would all be things that are daily hassles. And again, all of these are things that can be considered stressors. So that gets us to what is called psychoneuroimmunology. Psychoneuroimmunology. What this is a combination of psychology, neurology, and the endocrine processes. So psychoneuroimmunology is basically the study of these things all together. Psychology, neural, and endocrine processes together affect the immune system and health. So we're looking at kind of a more holistic approach to basically immunology, right? Immunology is the study of the immune system and health and how they're related. Psychoneuroimmunology is going to also pull in psychological concepts. So stress is obviously a very big part of psychoneuroimmunology. Some of the things that we know based off of psychoneuroimmunology studies. Stress can cause our immune systems to under or overreact. So if people have high stress levels or we're feeling stressed at a certain moment, our immune systems are affected by that. Now again, under or overreacting are both negative things, right? if our immune system overreacts when we become stressed, that's probably going to have negative consequences on our body. Same thing if it underreacts, right? If it underreacts and we need it to respond, that's also not going to be a good response. So those are both things that could be damaging to health. We also see that wounds heal more slowly in stressed people. So if you, I don't know, you got a cut or you fell and you scraped your arm or something, if you tend to be a highly stressed person, you'll actually heal slower than someone who is less stressed. Stressed people are more vulnerable to colds, so you're more likely to get sick, and stress can hasten the course of diseases. So stress is kind of an interesting thing because it's something that I think a lot of people just kind of accept as part of normal life, but it actually is incredibly negative as far as health consequences go. Having a high level of stress is really, really hard on your body. And it's important to think about this because obviously the way we live our lives is very different. If we want to go back and think about this general adaptation syndrome and what's going on here, again, for a long time, our stress response really evolved to deal with, being attacked by something, or having to deal with maybe a disaster or something like that. But these would be kind of short-lived. If you get attacked by an animal, basically you live or you die, and that's kind of it, right? But that attack isn't going to last for hours and hours and hours, most likely, right? It's likely going to be very short, and then it will be resolved. But if you think about stress today in our lives, it tends to look very different, right? The stress that most people experience today can last much longer. If you're stressed about something after school, you might be stressed for hours on end. You might be stressed for days or for weeks, right? If there's something really big, maybe like a good example would be moving, right? You're moving, you're going to go to college. That's a significant life change, and you're moving to a different state and you don't know anybody there. That can be a really big stressor. Now, I know that stressor is coming for a long time ahead of time, which means I can be stressed for a very long chunk of time. And again, the longer we're stressed, the harder it is on our body. So it's really important to kind of understand how important it is to kind of deal with these different stressors as they come into our lives. We're going to look at this in class. I'll talk about it and you'll kind of see it a little bit more. There's what's called the Holmes and Ray stress scale for non-adults, for youth, which basically is looking at your life events over the last year and trying to kind of get a guesstimate on how much stress you have, right? And the idea is the higher the number, the more stressful your life is. The lower the number, the less stressful. Now, again, this isn't like a perfect measure of exactly what you deal with, and everyone deals with stress differently and is able to deal with higher or lower number of stress, but it is kind of a good indicator to give us an idea of, okay, what are some of the things that we might be able to expect or some of the patterns we might be able to see in people's lives. That's going to get us to stress and some of our other connections. So one of the big ones we see is actually its relation to heart disease. So what we're going to actually look at and talk about is a simple example of what sometimes we call it, and it's really type A, type B personalities, but these really aren't super descriptive personality concepts here. This is why it's not in the personality section. They're really more connected to this stress idea, and they're focused on thinking about stress and looking at this and trying to define different types of people. So we're going to talk about both of them. We have type A and type B. Type A personality. So someone who has a type A personality is a person who is competitive, who is hard driving, who is impatient, who is verbally aggressive, and who is anger prone. Okay? Again, type A personality. Very, very, very driven, very demanding, incredibly, can be really, really pushing. There tends to be aggression there. Not always. All these things are going to be someone who would be type A. And what we've seen, and again, why these kind of type A, type B personalities are thought of or looked at is because of their connection with different stress-related issues later on in life. So type A men studied were 3 times more likely to develop heart disease, for example. So again, this type of personality, right, actually leads to, you can imagine how someone who lives this way has a higher level of stress in their life, and thus they're more likely to deal with something like heart disease. We also have what's called disease-prone personality, which tend to have a chronically negative mood and focus on bad things in life. Now, this is kind of not. This could kind of be like a subcategory of type A, but again, if you think about the way we're defining it, disease-prone personality is really focusing on the result, right? People who have a chronically negative mood and focus on bad things in life also tend to be more prone to disease. So what we're seeing here is how our responses to stress in general affect our health later on in life. We also have type B personalities. And this one is very much less descriptive, but someone who is a type B personality is a person who is generally easygoing and relaxed. This is sometimes also called a self-healing personality. So self-healing personality tends to have strong social relationships, be conscientious, emotionally secure, and enthusiastic about life. And again, what we're going to see here, if we're comparing type A to type B, is that type A is much more likely to have these health issues, where type B is less likely to. Now again, this doesn't mean that someone's personality directly results in them having some sort of illness later in life. What it is that if you have a type B personality or this self-healing personality, you just are less you're going to experience less stress naturally. You're more likely to use and receive support or seek out support from other people to help you deal with stress. You're just overall going to deal with stress better when it comes up. Where someone who has a type A personality is probably not going to deal with stress as well. And so what the difference is that how we deal with stress is then resulting in some of these health problems that we see later on. So again, type A, type B. Again, this isn't like a true personality test like we'll look at later on in this unit. That's going to wrap up this section, so please take a few moments and do a quick summary, and I'll see you guys next time.